So we are going to start today by talking about the basic 3-light setup. And Lex is going to be here hopefully any second so we can have our model. We are going to be going through to show you not only what the 3-light setup is, but how to translate that into something that is a little bit more advanced. And so almost anything that you do is based on this 3-light setup in a studio lighting situation or a portrait lighting situation. Not necessarily with scenic photography, but with portrait photography, almost everything is based on this. And you can have a setup that is 12, 15 lights, which is rare, but you could, and it still follows the principles of a basic 3-light setup. So that's why we're going to teach this. We're going to teach this in a way that is very basic, and the lighting setup that we're going to teach, you can take it home and use it. It is a very, very vanilla lighting setup. It's something that they might have used to do school portraits in the 70s. So it's not a spectacular lighting setup, but it illustrates the terms very clearly. So that's what we're going to start with. And then as we do that, we're going to be walking through some principles of light ratios. So that's where we're headed right now. So what I want to do first is whiteboard out what we're doing. Yeah, I guess I should have my little clicker here. So we're going to whiteboard out what we're doing. And this is how I diagram my lighting setups. It's not the, I don't know that this is a industry standard at all. In fact, I'm positive it is not. But it's the way I do it because it's really easy to understand and it works with the way I think. So I'll show you the way I do this, and then you can either choose to use it or you can see how other photographers do lighting diagrams, and it might work for you. So how we're going to set this up, we're going to have our white seamless. So this is a seamless piece of white paper, so usually it's just called white seamless. Sometimes this is called a cyc, short for cyclorama. That's a theater term. It's this big thing that goes around the back of a theater, like not a movie theater, but an actual theater where people act. And so I have a theater background, so a lot of times I'll call this a cyc, and people are like, what are you talking about? But that's what I'm talking about, is this white seamless piece of paper. And then in some studios it's called a cove. So it's a same kind of thing. It's just this white permanently installed wall. That's usually called a cove. But anyway, that's what this is. That's how I diagram that. And what we're going to do is, this is from the top down. We'll have Lex on a stool. So that's the top of Lex's head, and we'll put a nose on her. Here's her shoulders. So that's Lex. We're going to be shooting here. This is the camera. And then what we're going to have is our first light right there. And that first light, we're going to begin with basic closed loop lighting that we learned about yesterday. And so we'll put that at about a 45. And this is what we call our key light, or our main light. Main. So, and those I use interchangeably, so don't be frustrated with that. Key light, main light. And this is what anchors our lighting setup. And it doesn't matter if you have 50 lights or one light. You always have to have one light that sort of anchors everything you're doing. And this could even be natural light. So this might be a window, or it could be the sky, it could be whatever. But there's something that has to be the thing that anchors your entire lighting setup. And so what I suggest that you always do is start with one light and get that dialed in before you add anything else. Because a lot of times when you add a bunch of lights, it's difficult to figure out what's happening in that situation. But if you just start with one and then build and then build and then build, it's much easier to do that. Now, this afternoon, we're going to be doing a crazy setup with a bunch of lights, and I'm going to sort of throw that out of the window for time's sake. We're just going to set it all up, but it's a setup I've done a lot. So this is our key light. And for this, I'm going to put a 0 next to that. That's a 0. That'll make sense in a second. Over here, we're going to add a fill light. And the fill light is, so if we put a little line down the center of this key light here is illuminating one side of our subject's face. We're going to have shadows on the opposite side that we may want to soften just a bit. We might want to light those up a little bit so they're not quite as dark. Okay? And so that's what the fill light does. It just fills in a little bit. And usually you want this fill light to be not as bright as the key light. And so what I'll do here is I'll put a -1 or a -2 or a -3 based on how much lower I want this light to be, and these are stops. I want this to be 1 stop less, or 2 stops less, or 3 stops less. So when I have an advanced lighting diagram, what you'll see on that diagram are you'll see lights with numbers next to them, either a positive number or a negative number, saying this is what I want the light to be in relationship to the key light, right? And so a lot of people will use actual lighting ratios, and I'm really bad at math. And so let me show you why I don't use lighting ratios to illustrate this on my whiteboard. So a 1-to-1 lighting ratio means there's no difference between the key light and the fill light, or the key light and the kicker light, or whatever. So between two lights, no difference. They're the same power. A 2-to-1 ratio means there's a 1-stop difference. So that makes sense to me. So it's twice as bright, 2-to-1. A 4-to-1 is a 2-stop difference. And so because it's exponential, and usually you don't go beyond 4-to-1, but it's a 4-to-1 ratio is not 4 stops brighter, it's 2 stops brighter. And so because I'm bad at math, I get those confused, and I'll start wanting to do a 4-to-1 ratio, and then I'll just go way too far. And so to keep it simple for me, I just use numbers. And the other reason I use numbers is because what I showed you yesterday on my light meter, the EV value shows up in stops. And so it's easy for me to go, oh, this is 1 stop less, and so we're just going to say -1. And then on my light meter, it just says -1. Super easy. But as I'm building out lighting setups and figuring those out, I have a little notebook. I didn't bring it with me today. But I've got tons of notes of different diagrams, and they all have numbers next to them saying what the relationship is between the key and anything else. So the only light that doesn't usually have a number on it is the key light on my little diagrams. Unless there's a light that doesn't need to be anything but equal to the main light, and usually it's got nothing or a 0. That makes sense so far? Okay, so we're going to do this where this is a 2-to-1 ratio. So this light will be 1 stop lower than this light. So we have key or main, fill, and then what we're going to do is we're going to have this light back here, and this is a separation light, or sometimes called a kicker. And this one is usually +1. So generally speaking, this is 1 stop brighter than the main light. And that +1, by the way, this is also called a hair light. So this can be called 3 different things. And let me tell you why I'll use 3 different terms for this light. So if I have a model that has really dark hair, or a subject that's really dark and a really dark background, and I'm throwing light on that to try to separate the subject from the background, I call it a separation light. If I'm doing a glamour setup and I'm trying to illuminate like the shape of whoever I'm shooting and make them look a little bit glowy, I usually call that a kicker light. If I'm doing a basic Olin Mills type portrait and I'm illuminating the hair to sort of give it a glow, I usually call that a hair light. So usually if it's a blonde model, it's a hair light, and if it's a brunette model, it's a separation light, even though they're the exact same light. They're doing 2 different things. So that one is usually +1. The other thing with this, that +1 is highly dependent on whatever it is you're shooting. So the darker the subject is, usually you're at 1 stop more. But if you have somebody that has very light hair, if you do this 1 stop more than the key light, usually you'll blow the hair out or make it look weird, and so you might have to dial this down. So everything we're going to do here is a starting point, but then we have to adjust to taste to make sure that that all works. So this is a basic 3-light setup. And what we'll find is almost anything that we do in a studio or even on location follows this. So think about yesterday or day before yesterday, whenever it was, when we were out on the street. We had a key light, which was the sun, and we had a fill light, which was our white reflector, and we had a hair light, which was the silver reflector. It was a 3-light setup, but we just did it with natural light. And so all that happens over and over, you'll see this. The other kind of light that we don't have on here is called a special. And a special is when you have a light that's illuminating one special part of the scene, not necessarily the main part. And so you might have like a lamp in the scene, and you'll put a little speed light inside that lamp to make it show up. That's called a special. Or maybe you're illuminating a sign or something like that in the scene, you'd put a light on that. That's called a special. So that's the other light that you might see show up from time to time. Okay, so the basic 3-light setup, that's the diagram. We're actually going to do it. So Lex is going to come out here, and we are going to start shaping this light. And we're going to meter this as we go. Hi, welcome to the day. Yay, good morning. So we are going to start with our key light, and we're going to light the key light over here so you guys can see. But as we build this out, unfortunately, we're going to be surrounding her with lights, and so it'll be more and more difficult for you to see. But hopefully between all the cameras, we'll see everything. So I'm going to move this stuff around, and we will start building this out. And we've preset some of this stuff to make it easier to work with. So I'm going to start with very, very easy to use light. And because I'm using these soft boxes and we're working in a sort of a small environment and we have a terrific model, it's going to be very difficult for us to get this wrong. But if we were shooting with harder lights, it would be a lot easier to mess things up. And after this, we're going to try to mess some things up with shadows and then talk to you about how fixing them. So if you're starting out with studio lighting, this setup is awesome because it's really difficult to get things wrong. So John, can you plug this in for me somewhere?
Yeah, I got it right back here.
And again, we're triggering these using Pocket Wizards. And the reason we're using Pocket Wizards is my light meter has a Pocket Wizard trigger in it. These also have a different triggering system, but we're not using that. Okay. Awesome. We're going to do everything in manual mode. This is all manual mode. So the first thing I'm going to do is put this about like this. So if my camera is here, this is about at a 45 and a 45, and we should get basic Rembrandt closed loop light. Now we're not going to get a lot of shadows over on this side of Lex's face because this softbox is so close, so it's going to sort of wrap around. And so to try to augment those, I'm going to bring this back just a hair. But normally I would get this as close as I possibly can to get that nice wraparound soft light. Okay, so we're going to do that. Step one is for us to meter the light. That's what we want to do. So Lumisphere is up. I have this set to my camera's ISO, which is 100. I have it set to my camera's sync speed, which is 200. And I'm going to solve for the aperture value. Now in this, I know that I want to shoot this at f11. Why? Once again, we want to have nice depth of field. That's what we want. And we also want to sort of eliminate some of the ambient light that's floating around in the studio right now. So we're going to close down the aperture just a bit. We might even go to 16 just to really close things down. But 11 is a good starting point. So let's see what we have. I'm going to come back over here, just like we learned yesterday, point it to where my camera is going to be, take a reading, and that tells me I'm at 4.5. I'm going to take another reading. Sometimes when I take my first reading and I'm not so confident, I'll always take a second reading. And the reason I'm not so confident in this reading is that I think that flash, that was the first flash it had, it might have dumped some power. So I want to see if it was actually charged up. So I'll do this again. 4.5, so we were good. But when in doubt, always meter one more time. So let's give us some more power. We need to be at 11, so let's go up, what, 3 stops, is that right? So John is changing that. And if you, John, if you push on that,
Push it, goes to 1 stop.
yeah, it'll do 1 stop. All right.
Try that.
So I pushed my button to make that flash again. We'll take a little reading here. That's at 16, so let's go down. With, this is sort of crazy, we can't do it here, but on my Profoto Acute lights, I've used them for so long that I can get within probably a half stop of what the light needs to be based on the sound it makes when it pops. So you'll start, it's almost like an instrument if you use those lights over and over. See where we are here. That's 10, so let's just go up a 3rd stop, just 3 little notches. There we go. 11. So we're exactly at 11. And that's one of the things I love about these lights is you can just say, oh, we need to go exactly 1/3 stop, and blip, 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 and it's exactly 1/3 stop. All right, let's take a shot and see how things look. So I'll grab my camera here.
Did you change batteries in the camera?
No, I did not.
We're probably fine.
I think we're good on the battery. If it dies, we have one. Okay. I'm like, I thought we had one on standby. We do have one on standby. Okay, so we're going to take a shot here. So I'm going to take my camera. I'm going to try to put it on the tripod and leave it so we can sort of build out these lights. And we can see exactly what's happening here. So I'm setting this to 200, F11, ISO 100. Okay, so on this, we're seeing, oh yeah, this is perfect. This is perfect. This is great. I can't wait for you guys to see this. Because now we're going to see the issue that we were talking about yesterday. Remember I said that this camera is sort of finicky on the shutter speed when we were shooting at 200 and no photo selected. Oh, here we go. Nope. Oh. It's got a flag on it. It's flagged. Here we go. There it is. All right. So on this is terrific. You can see right here, see that? That's the shutter. That's the shutter showing up in there. So 200th of a second, sometimes when the shutter is just waking up in the day, it'll be a little slower than later on once it's been used a little bit. And so right now we're going to slow the shutter down to 160 to make sure we don't have that. So in the 5D Mark II and the 5D Mark III, mainly the 5D Mark II, thank you, they have a reputation for doing this. So watch this. When this next one comes in, you'll see that disappear. So the thing with that, and I have done this so many times, a lot of times, and I'll do this, I'm going to exaggerate this a little bit because I've seen this happen a few times. I'll be shooting vertically. Thank you. I guess I should show you what I'm doing. And I'll do something like this. I'm not talking to Lex at all. I'm breaking all the rules. I'm just like, I'll just shoot. She knows. So sometimes I'll shoot, and I've exaggerated this just a bit. So this I shot at 320 to really get that shutter in there. Sometimes I'll be shooting at, like, let's say 200 or 250, and I'll see this black area, and it'll correspond to where the softbox is, and I'll start moving the softbox to try to fix it. And I have done this so many times where I'm shooting, I'm like, the softbox is in the way, and I'll move it, and I'm like, it's still in the way, what the heck? And then I realize, oh, it's my shutter. So have you ever done that, John? Or is it just me? It's probably just me. Okay, so anyway, we're...
Don't turn on the pocket wizard. That one I do every day.
That one you do every day. All right, let me take one more shot to get us back on track here. And Lex, I'm going to take a picture, so smile. There you go. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, she's a mind reader. That's what she is. She just knows. All right, so now we have the shadows on the right side of her face or left side, depending on which side you're looking from. And what we want to do is we want to minimize some of these shadows right here. Okay, so our key light is set. We don't have perfect Rembrandt light because that softbox is so large, it's just wrapping around, so it's killing these shadows here. But you get the idea. What we want to do now is sort of soften this. All right, so we're going to bring that light out. I'll trade you lights, John.
It's plugged in, so don't push it too far.
Don't push it too far. That's what my mom used to say when I was, sorry. Is that bunking right there? No big problem here? All right, so what I'm going to do here is we're going to take this light, we're setting it to the opposite side, and we're going to raise it up about like that. And since this is a fill, I'm just going to leave it sort of flat. We're just filling in some shadows, just like that. And I'll pop it back a little bit. And there we go, thank you. So I'm going to just take a peek on this light. That's at 6.9, so 7. Infrared is on, okay. So on these lights, that one was set at a power level of 7. I'm just going to start with this one at a power level of 6 because that's one stop less on this light. I know it's not going to work out to be exactly right because the distance is not the same between those two lights. So if the distance was exactly equal, then it would be exactly one stop less. But since it's not, we'll have to be a little bit finicky. So let's talk about how we meter this. So the first thing I want to do, lumisphere down, and I'm going to meter my key light. So this light over here, I'm going to meter that, not for exposure, but just to see how bright it is so I can compare it to my fill light. Okay, so lumisphere down, I'm going underneath the chin of Lex, and I'm pointing it straight at my light. So I'm going to do that. I've got that. And just to make sure that I have an accurate reading, I'm actually going to step in here. I'm going to block the light from this one. I'll take that reading. And that meters at 13. So we metered originally at 11. Why is that at 13? Because when we originally metered, the lumisphere was up, and it was accounting not only for the light, but all of the shade that was over there. And so it said we needed a wider aperture. So that's why you put the lumisphere down and go to the light. We're not metering for exposure, We're just metering for our relationships. Okay, so that's done. I'm going to put that in memory. I'm going to press my little delta EV button that we learned about yesterday. And then I'm going to go to the opposite side, and I'm going to meter this light. Metering it right there, pushing and holding. And this says -2. So it's exactly 2 stops less. And so we want it to be -1 stop less. So what I'll do is I'll increase that to 1. I'm increasing that power by 1 stop. And I'm going to come in here. We're going to do that one more time. I'll point it right at the light, push and hold. And now this says 1.5. And so it's, even though this is saying it's doubling in power, sometimes you still have to finesse that because of either reflections on the ground or softboxes or maybe some influence of light somewhere else. But we need to give this a little bit more light. I got to make sure. Did that say -1.5? I think it did. Yeah, sometimes I work the wrong way. So we'll do that one more time. Yeah, and we're going to take this. Now this says -1.1. So it's 1 stop less light than we had. So we could finesse that a little bit more, but we're going to keep moving. So 1/10 of a stop, we'll take it. Okay, so we have that. And now we're going to take another reading. And this new reading, what we're going to do is we're going to meter both lights. Because when you start adding multiple lights, you're adding light. And so you have to make sure that, are you still at 11, or now are we at a different aperture value? So we're going to go ahead and meter that. So again, I have to come back, make sure I'm not in the way. Also, I need to clear out the memory, so I'm going to change the mode, come back. So we're ready to go. And now it's metering F14, because 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 1, right? When you start adding lights, you're adding light. So now our exposure has changed a little bit. And what we can do is, if we had something like this in the future and we still wanted to be at 11, we could take our lights and dial them all down equally to get where we needed to be. For now, we're just going to go with it. We're going to go with 14. So I'm going to take a shot. So, yes, you're smiling. It looks great. Okay, so now when this shot comes up, it's very, very flat lighting. We still see some shadows over here. This is loading in the raw, but it's pretty flat. And so a 2-to-1 ratio with softboxes looks a lot like a 1-to-1 ratio. It looks very, very similar. We don't have a lot of definition. You can see some shadows over here. Again, this screen isn't calibrated like my computer monitor. On the computer monitor, you can actually see a little bit more of the shadows over here. But this is a 2-to-1 ratio. We could really pull this out and go down quite a bit more. The other way that you can do this, if you just want to do this quickly, is just dial this down, take a picture, see how it looks, and just do it by using your eyeballs. So there are a few photographers that do that. Tamara Levine is a great photographer in LA, and she does all of her lighting setups like that. She just turns them on and sees how it looks and goes. I don't know how she does it, but she's very successful, and she does a great job. Okay, so that is the key and the fill light and how to meter that. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to meter the hair light. Now on this, because we're working in a pretty small space, these lights are hitting our white background, and that light is reflecting. So the white here is reflecting light back. And so normally I wouldn't put a hair light on this shot, but we're going to do it just because we need to learn how to meter that stuff, okay? So as soon as we do that, what we're going to get is overexposed hair, but we're going to do it just so you understand the principles. Still with me? Okay. I'm going to tie my shoe eventually, so don't let it... You guys are all like, yeah, I will. I know it's there. I don't want to stop everything and tie my shoe, but everybody's going, is he going to tie that shoe? I will. Yeah. Raise your hand if you were wondering. Yeah, everybody was wondering. You're wondering that? Yeah, I will. I'll do it. Yeah, I'll just tie it right now, just because, yeah. The whole workshop comes down because my shoe is untied. All right. Yeah, I was aware. All right. Let's keep going. This is so funny. Still F11? Yeah. Oh, am I? Yeah. Oh, John points out something that's very critical. I didn't change my aperture on my camera. So let's actually, what did we meter at?
14.
14. Yeah, let me do it again before you turn that on. John's like, oh, by the way, you didn't change your aperture, so your exposure was wrong. It was my shoe distracting me. That's what it was. Okay. Yeah, now we'll see. It's not the monitor that's not calibrated. I just didn't, same look, just not as bright. Okay, good. We need to do a color management class so I can, we would calibrate that monitor and fix it. Maybe we'll do that on a lunch break.
Actually, that monitor's got to be lighter so the cameras pick it up better.
Oh, that's what it is. It's calibrated for the cameras.
Yeah.
That works. All right, so what we're going to do next, I'm going to just show what we've done here. This, John, we're going to need an extension cord. This will never make it.
Where do you want to go to?
It just needs to go up and over. So as soon as I raise it up.
On this side.
Okay.
Let me just power that down for a second.
Yeah, so we're low on extension cords. The whole shoe thing, it's shoe gate, lace gate. Yeah, I could see you looking, going, tie your shoe.
Let's come in from this side.
Okay, we'll come in from the opposite side here. So what we're going to do here is, we have this on a boom because we don't want the light to show up in the photo. And so we're just going to twist this around. Just like that. And then the other thing that we're going to use eventually is this doesn't have any kind of grid in it. And we're going to put a grid on that because what's going to happen is the light's going to go right into the lens. And we don't want that. And so we have to move this around about like this so we know it's behind Lex's head. I'm going to put a sandbag on this so we don't have something falling over. There we go. That's good. And then what we'll do is we'll just start working with this. The other thing that we might need for this is a small step stool, or I might have to adjust the light. Not that you're short, no. But a little short. So put this guy up here. And this is very, very close. Just like that. Okay. Yeah, everybody, we all need an apple box. Yes, or some kind of stool, something. It's the joy of monolights. Yes, you have a question?
Is there like a rule as how high you should put the hair light?
Yes, there is actually. And let's see if we can show this. So I'm going to turn off the modeling lights on the front here. And I'll move this camera so our video camera here can show this. So, yeah. So one of the problems with having a hair light that's back there, sometimes that can spill over onto the face. And so if we had a hair light that was very, very vertical, and I'll do this. Here we go. So let's say we had this and it was really vertical. Something like this. We're going to move it even farther forward. Yeah. So, and this would be like really high, way up. And it seems like this is exaggerated, but we're doing this because sometimes you'll have a separation light that's very, very high. And what happens is it will spill over and we'll get light on the nose of our subject. Or sometimes if it's at an angle and not directly behind, we'll see it spilling across and starting to cast shadows on the front of the person. So I'm really particular to make sure that it only falls on the shoulders and the back of the head and that nothing spills. The other thing that happens is if we have it back where we had it before, and this apple box, by the way, reminds me of Dane Sanders. He's a photographer in Southern California. He has a whole workshop on, like a part of his workshop on all the different things you can do with an apple box. It's really funny. It's good times. Okay, so if we have this back here, so Lex, let's have you look left. What happens is, notice that now this hair light just changed the light on her face. And so you have to be very particular about that. If that starts happening, then you would have to move this over. So those are the kinds of things that you look for with a separation light or a hair light. Is it really just on the back of that person's head or the back of the product, or is it spilling over onto the front?
So if you gridded that,
it's going to constrain that.
More so it possibly would not spill as much? Okay.
Yep. The other thing that's going to happen here, if this is too low, the light's going to go forward and hit the lens of our camera. Or if this is a larger light modifier, like a small softbox, the diffuse light will go and hit the lens. And so in that scenario, what we do is, if you can't add a grid, that's why grids were invented. Grids on everything to control is awesome. But if you didn't have grids, what we'd have to do is come on this side, and we would have to actually put a flag up here to block the light from hitting the lens. Because right now, that is shining right in my face. In fact, I think if you can show that, you can see that this light is clearly coming into the lens. And so we'd have to flag that somehow so that we'd restrict that, or just use a grid. So let's put a 20-degree grid on there. Yeah, which one do you have? Oh, let's try the 10. We'll try the 10. We'll see if that works. We'll put a 10 on there. And so now we've immediately eliminated that light going forward. We've constrained this. It might be a little bit too constrained. We'll have to see. If it is, we'll go with a 20-degree grid. But we're trying to keep light from getting to the edge of this and hitting our camera. So I can't vote more. I can't speak more highly of grids. I love them. I love the grids. And even look at this. So turn your head left. So you can go pretty far before this spills. So go a little bit more right. Boom, right there. Yeah, and you can see. So she's got more ability to move her head and pose and do those kinds of things. Grids, awesome. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to meter this and see how it works. So I'll take this. So what we first have to meter our key light. So this is our key, right? Losing track. Yep. So I'll meter the key light. So we got that. That's at 13. Putting that in memory. And don't forget, we've just turned the modeling lights on these lights. So and don't be confused at like, oh, you turned them off. We just turned the modeling light. Cool. So that's in memory. Put my little delta EV. Now on a grid, sometimes it's difficult to meter a grid because the light is so restrictive. So take a couple of readings to make sure you've got it right. And I know this is going to be way too bright. I can feel it. Is it pointed that way? Awesome. We can fix it. We can fix it. How's that? Better? Better, better. Okay. So we'll meter this light. I'll just meter it while I'm up here. Pushing and holding. Actually, this says negative 0.3. So this is actually 1/3 stop lower than our key light. So what I'll do is I will increase that. 0.8. 1. It's at 1. Exactly at 1. So now that's 1 stop brighter than our key light. And the reason I just went up there and adjusted it is because I've used these D1s about 5 billion times. And it's like your camera or your lighting equipment. If you use it enough, you'll get to sort of memorize the buttons on your gear, just like you would if you used a piano or a violin. You know, no pianist looks at the keys when they're playing, right? They just know. The same thing is happening of most gear that you can use. So that's how we did that. All right, now we're going to take an overall reading. It should not change, by the way, because the light that we just added is behind, right? So it still should be 13, but we're going to meter just to make sure. And it's 13. So we'll take a shot at 13. Thank you. We're going to take a picture now. If you smile, that's perfect. Lovely. Okay, and you can see on this shot, we've really, really constrained the light on her hair. When it shows up, it's just a little touch of light, and that works just fine. Now, if that was a darker background, you know what? Could you get a black, and we'll throw the black V-flat behind, and we can see with and without. It'll be a little bit more pronounced. Right now, are there questions on the 3-light setup and the metering that we've done so far? Yes?
What's a background light considered? Is it a background light or is it a special? Or and when would you use that?
That's a good question. I think it's just called a background light.
Yeah.
Yeah, light on the background. That's an excellent point. I totally forgot that light. But yeah, background light.
Okay.
Maybe somebody online has a better name for it, but yeah, background light. Yeah, let's take a quick shot here now that we have. And John, move that to the left just a little bit more. There we go. Perfect. Beautiful smile. All right, now we can see that separation light really makes a difference. Yeah, you can see that a little bit.
Mark, it's so nice to sit here and have Alexa's smiling face looking at us the whole time.
I know, isn't it awesome?
Can we just keep that up all day?
Sure, I vote for that.
Such a cute smile. Can we ask another question?
Yeah.
Okay, so Jamie D said, if your light meter allows you to trigger individual lights when metering, is it necessary to flatten the lumisphere when measuring the dazzle?
Okay, yeah, so yes, that's a great question. When you're metering, let's say, because on this meter, with the built-in Pocket Wizard functionality on some other meters, you have the ability to trigger lights in groups. So you can turn lights on and off. And the meter I was talking about yesterday, the Seikonic something 58, the new one that controls speed lights and all the mini and flex stuff, you can turn lights on and off for metering as well. And so sometimes you have that ability. And so let's pretend that we had that ability, which we do, I just don't have it configured correctly. And I was only going to meter this light. Let's just pretend when I push this button, this light is the only one that flashes. Well, if I came around here, and I'm not going to do it because I want to make sure you guys see, and I had my Lumisphere up and I metered just this light, there is an issue because we're not just metering this light with the Lumisphere up. We're metering this light and the reflections from the floor and the reflections from the ceiling and all the light that's around. And so you could have an incorrect reading because if you have a reflector somewhere or if you have maybe the other modifier you have is an umbrella, which is highly reflective, you're going to get the light from multiple sources with this up. And so even if you can only trigger one light, you should put this down. By the way, another thing that I forgot to mention about metering, you should never wear a white shirt when you're shooting in a studio because you just became a reflector. And so when you are metering, your shirt is going to reflect in the meter and you will get consistently wrong meter readings. And so you should wear dark clothes. This is a little bit brighter than I would normally wear actually, but yeah, dark gray clothes or black because you'll reflect light in your meter. Or you're just going to have an assistant with dark clothes or a meter like this. Or you can work with a model like Lex who's done this so many times that sometimes I just give her the meter and she just meters herself. So that works too. And then I have to pay her as an assistant and a model, so that's crazy. Okay, what other questions do we have?
So one more
Did you
question.
say no, I don't? She's like, that's never happened. Never has that happened. All right, that's true. Now, great, the whole billing cycle's changed now. Yeah, sorry.
So we got a question from Jim, not me. What is the criteria that you use to decide the light ratio from the key to the fill to the hair light? Is it based on experience or trial and error?
I do several things. One of those is, and I haven't had the opportunity to do this much in the last few months, but for the past 2 years or so, every Friday I try to schedule a personal shoot day. What I did is I would bring in a model or we'd bring in some subject, product, whatever, and it would be a day for me to do just to shoot with no expectation of success at all. The whole point was to try new things, to try to emulate maybe something I saw in a magazine or a book, or try some new technique that I saw, in a workshop or whatever. And based on that, then I would create a new lighting setup or a new style. And so that's how I create these little diagrams and figure out what we're doing. Lex and I have actually done 2 or 3 of those experimental, let's figure stuff out. And sometimes it's highly successful and you get great stuff because it doesn't matter if you get a photo or not. There's no client. Sometimes disastrous. We've had that as well. Where you're just like, oh, that will never see the light of day. But the point is, if you shoot something and fail, that's still a success because you've learned something from that. And so if you actually saw all the photos that I've created, the majority of them are failures. The vast majority are failures because I was trying to dial something in and figure something out. I would never go to a commercial client or somebody that's hired me to do something and try something out for the first time on the spot. I've done it rarely because sometimes you don't have a choice, but usually if I'm hired to do something specific, I'll try to emulate what it is we're doing first, and then once I have it dialed in and figure out all the problems and things we have to overcome and gear that we don't have, then we'll actually go and shoot it wherever we're supposed to shoot it. And I build the client for that. I build them for pre-production days, and that's how that works. Even this workshop, almost everything that we do here has been rehearsed in some way, either at my studio at home or on some photo shoot or something somewhere. We're about to do a demo. John and I got here at 2 hours before we started and set it all up just to make sure it was going to work because we don't want to do it live and be like, oh, well, it doesn't work. Can't do that. So yeah, that's how I figure all that stuff out is by that. The other way to figure out lighting setups, Rotovision, Rotovision, is a publisher of these phenomenal books, and some of them are out of print, but they have, 200 or 300 pages of photographers, and it's not one photographer. It's dozens and dozens of photographers, and it's like, here's a shot by so-and-so photographer, and it's a beautiful shot, and then here's all of the details on how it was lit with the lighting diagram and all the gear that was used and some comments by the photographer. And then you turn a page, and then it's a totally different photographer and what they did, and turn the page and a totally different photographer. And so when I found these books years ago, over a decade ago, and that's why most of them are out of print, I got the one on portrait lighting, and I spent about a year and a half, and I duplicated every single photo in the book just to sort of try out all the different things. And so you can do things like that as well. That will help. All right, do we have other questions?
I have a review question from Redhead17, who's joining us from Liverpool. Would you normally use the color checker passport with each new light added if you were building up from one flash?
I would do this. So if I was, let's say that we were shooting several different looks with Lex, and so we had a single light, and we're going to shoot a series, and then we're going to add a fill light, and we're going to shoot a series, and then we're going to add a kicker light, and then we're going to do a series. At that point, I would have done the color checker passport with the first light, and then when we added the second one, I would do it again, and we added the third one, I'd do it again. But in this scenario, where we knew we were going to shoot with all three lights, I would do it at the very, very end. And for time, I'm skipping the white balance stuff that I would normally do in a situation like this. But normally, I would do that at the very end when the light is all set. And I would shoot a shot that I would use later in post-production to calibrate all of the other photos. And so that's how that would work.
I think we might have some questions in the studio audience.
Yes.
Will this lighting scenario work if you're trying to light a whole scene with one person in it, and so that one person is lit, but the whole scene is lit?
It could. It really depends on the inverse square law. So what we're doing now with these lights, these are very large diffused lights, or medium-sized diffused lights, and they're quite a ways from our background, and so we had this white-ish background, light gray background. But if we moved everything much closer to the background, that background would actually get darker. And so, actually, if we move these closer to Lex, the background would get darker. And so when we started, I said normally I would shoot with these much, much closer. I didn't because I wanted you to actually see what I was doing. And so use the inverse square law to your advantage. The problem with the way that we have this set up right now is you can't really see a lot of the shadows that we would normally create because the light is too far from Lex's face. So normally it would be, gosh, very, very close on both sides, and it would be this sort of cocoon of light. Usually my key light is really close. My fill light I keep back a little ways. So those are some of the things to consider. So if you build it out from your background a little bit and let the light fall off and do that, that'll be good. When you're working with a background, remember this. If you want the background to be dark and not illuminated, keep your subject away from the background and your lights close to your subject. If you want your scene, the entire scene to be illuminated, keep your subject closer to the background and your lights farther away, because the light is falling off and you're going to get the majority of the even light back here. Or if you move that closer to your lights up here, the light's going to fall off. You're going to get all your good light up here, and this is going to be dark. So that's sort of the consideration, is the distance and the relationships between the background and the lights and that whole inverse square law thing. What I like to do is to control the light on the set in very specific ways. So generally what I'll do is we would have Lex forward, and we would light her pretty close with all the different lights. And normally I would have even grids on those lights to control the spill, and maybe even some throw rugs to keep the light from bouncing. So I really want to constrain that. And then what I would do on the background is I would use specials. So I would use lights to introduce pockets of light so I could shape the light even on the background so that it's just not a big wash of light. It's actually showing some depth to that background, and you can even stagger the luminosity or the brightnesses of those different things. So you might have a bright lamp or a bright chair, a little bit darker wood, or maybe a highlight on books in a library, something like that. And so you can really control the scene. It depends on how many lights you have and how much time you have and those things. Yes?
So in the exact same scenario, the separation or hair light, how does that get handled so it's outside of the shot?
Big stand with a boom is generally what you need. And this is a grip head It's really not meant to hold a light over like that. Everybody does it. But we have some normal boom stands they have these weights on them, and they can go 10 feet, 12 feet. So you can get that way out over. The other thing that you can do is you can put one of these guys sort of up and away, and if you have enough power, you can shoot at quite a distance, and then you use like a 5-degree grid to really constrain that. So yeah, that works as well. So and this really, once you start doing this stuff, this is when all of those different specific modifiers go, oh, right, we would want to put a grid here, and oh, right, we would want to have this type of hard light here, and we'd want to put, whatever. And so it makes a lot more sense. And in fact, in that scenario, when you're like, hey, I don't have very many lights, but I want to have a nice wash, an umbrella would probably be better because the light's bouncing everywhere. And so you get nice soft light. And on these two guys, yeah. Because your light would be hitting the ground and the walls and the ceiling, and it'd be introducing more light back on the back, yeah.